What does it mean to be free? Is it simply the absence of physical chains? Or is it something deeper, something internal, a state of the soul that can be found even within the stone walls of a prison cell? And what does it take for one person to give up their own freedom, their family, their career, and the best years of their life, for the freedom of their people? Nelson Mandela's monumental autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, is one of the greatest and most important stories of the 20th century. It is the epic first-person account of a life that is almost too extraordinary to believe. But this book is more than just a historical record. It is a profound, philosophical, and deeply human journey into the heart of a man who endured 27 years of brutal imprisonment and emerged not with a spirit of bitterness, but with a message of forgiveness and reconciliation that would dismantle one of the most evil systems of government in modern history, and in doing so, change the course of his country and inspire the entire world. This is the story of that long, long walk. The story does not begin in a prison cell or a courtroom. It begins in the quiet rolling hills of the Transkei region of South Africa, in a small village named Kunu. Nelson Mandela, born Rolihlahla, which in his Xhosa language prophetically means pulling the branch of a tree, or troublemaker, describes an almost idyllic rural childhood. It was a world of simple routines, of herding cattle, of stick fighting with the other boys, a world deeply connected to the earth, and to the ancient traditions of his Thembu people. As a boy of royal lineage, he was groomed for a role of counsel and leadership. He would sit and listen for hours as the tribal elders would meet, patiently and respectfully, hearing every single person's point of view until a consensus was reached. This, he would later say, was his first and most important lesson in the nature of true democracy. His journey into the Western world began with his education, first at missionary schools and then at the University College of Fort Hare, the only residential center of higher learning for Black Africans in South Africa at the time. It was here that his mind was open to a wider world of ideas and that his political consciousness began to stir. But his true education began when he ran away from an arranged marriage and made his way to the bustling, vibrant, and brutally segregated city of Johannesburg. It was here, in the sprawling black township of Soweto, that he came face to face with the full, daily, and humiliating reality of the system that would define his life struggle: apartheid. Apartheid, which means apartness in the Afrikaans language, was more than just segregation. It was a brutal, systematic, and all-encompassing system of racial oppression, designed to ensure the complete and permanent political and economic dominance of the white minority over the black majority. Every aspect of life was governed by it. Black people were denied the right to vote, to own land, to live where they wanted, or to work in certain jobs. It was a system designed to crush the human spirit. In Johannesburg, Mandela became a lawyer, and along with his partner Oliver Tambo, he opened the first black-owned law firm in the country. Day after day, he saw the brutal reality of the system as he defended countless innocent men and women against the petty and cruel injustices of the apartheid laws. This first-hand experience transformed him from a young man with a general sense of injustice into a dedicated and disciplined political activist. He joined the African National Congress, or the ANC, and quickly rose through its ranks. In his early years as an activist, he was a firm believer in the power of nonviolent resistance, inspired by the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. Along with his comrades, he organized boycotts, strikes, and acts of civil disobedience. But the government's response was not negotiation, it was violence. The turning point, the moment that shattered Mandela's belief in nonviolence, came on March 21, 1960, in the township of Sharpeville. On that day, a group of unarmed protesters had gathered to demonstrate against the hated pass laws. The police opened fire on the peaceful crowd, killing 69 people, most of them shot in the back as they tried to flee. For Mandela and the leaders of the ANC, the Sharpeville massacre was a brutal and undeniable lesson. It was proof that the regime would not be moved by peaceful protest. It was a declaration of war against their people. And they made the fateful and agonizing decision to respond in kind. They decided they had no choice but to fight back. Mandela went underground and became one of the co-founders of the ANC's new armed wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, or Spear of the Nation. The country boy, the lawyer, the non-violent protester, had now become a soldier, a freedom fighter. For the next 2 years, Mandela lived the life of a fugitive in his own country. He was known as the Black Pimpernel, a master of disguise, constantly moving, organizing the secret armed struggle against the apartheid state. But in 1962, he was finally captured. He and his fellow leaders of the ANC were put on trial for sabotage and treason in what became known as the Rivonia trial. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. They knew they would be found guilty, but they decided to use the trial not as a legal defense, but as a political platform. They would turn the courtroom into a stage to put the apartheid system itself on trial before the world. At the end of the trial, facing the death penalty, Nelson Mandela stood up and delivered one of the greatest and most courageous speeches of the 20th century. He spoke for 3 hours, detailing the long history of injustice that his people had suffered, and he ended with a powerful and unforgettable declaration of his principles. He said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." The speech was an act of incredible moral courage. The world was listening. The judge, perhaps under the pressure of this new international scrutiny, spared Mandela and his comrades from the death penalty. Instead, he sentenced them to life in prison. And so began the long, dark, and seemingly endless night of Nelson Mandela's imprisonment. He was sent to a place that was designed to be a living hell, a place designed to break the human spirit, the infamous prison on Robben Island. The University of Robben Island. For the next 18 of his 27 years in prison, Robben Island was Nelson Mandela's world. It was a harsh and brutal place. The prisoners were forced to do back-breaking labor in a lime quarry, the bright glare of which would permanently damage Mandela's eyes. They slept on thin mats on cold stone floors. The food was meager, and they were subjected to the constant, petty, and dehumanizing cruelty of the prison guards. The goal of Robben Island was to crush the spirit of the resistance, to make these proud freedom fighters forget that they were men. But Mandela and his comrades refused to be broken. Instead, they performed an incredible act of philosophical alchemy. They transformed their prison into a university. This is the philosophical heart of the book. The prison cell became a crucible, a place that forged and refined Mandela's character and his philosophy of leadership. On Robben Island, he and the other leaders of the ANC secretly organized political education classes. They would write messages on scraps of paper and hide them in used matchboxes. They would hold secret debates. They called their prison the University of Robben Island, or more affectionately, Nelson Mandela University. Mandela himself embarked on a profound journey of self-discipline and self-education. He learned to control his own anger and his own desire for revenge. He understood that to be a leader, he had to be a model of discipline and integrity. And he made a decision that would have profound consequences for the future of his country. He decided to learn Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors. His comrades were shocked. Why would he learn the language of the enemy? But Mandela's reasoning was a masterclass in strategic empathy. He knew that if he were ever to negotiate with his captors, he would have to understand them. He had to understand their history, their culture, and their fears. To defeat your enemy, he reasoned, you must first know them. This was not an act of submission. It was an act of profound strategic intelligence. The years on Robben Island were a long and brutal test. He was separated from his beloved wife, Winnie, and his children. He suffered from illness. He endured the loss of his mother and his eldest son, and was not allowed to attend their funerals. But through it all, he held on to his dignity, his discipline, and his unwavering belief in the ultimate victory of his cause. The fiery, impulsive revolutionary who had entered the prison was slowly and patiently being transformed into the wise, pragmatic, and incredibly disciplined statesman who would one day change the world. After 27 years, the world had changed. The international pressure against the apartheid regime had become overwhelming. South Africa was a pariah state, crippled by economic sanctions. The government finally realized that it could not survive without releasing Nelson Mandela and negotiating with the ANC. On February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela, at the age of 71, walked out of Victor Verster prison, a free man. The moment was broadcast live across the globe. It was a moment of incredible triumph and joy. But Mandela knew that this was not the end of the walk. It was just the beginning of its most difficult and dangerous stage. South Africa was a country on the brink of a bloody civil war. On one side there was the white minority, terrified of losing their power and their privilege. On the other side there was the black majority, who had been oppressed for centuries and who were now, justifiably, demanding justice and retribution. The country was a tinderbox of hatred and fear, and into this tinderbox walked Nelson Mandela. And what he did next was one of the greatest acts of statesmanship in human history. He chose reconciliation over revenge. He began a series of tense and difficult negotiations with the white president F.W. de Klerk to dismantle the apartheid system and to create a new, multiracial democracy. At the same time, he had to travel the country, speaking to his own people and convincing them to embrace a future of forgiveness, not vengeance. It was an incredibly delicate and dangerous balancing act. He knew that the only way to build a new, stable, rainbow nation was to reassure the white minority that they still had a place in the country. He met with the leaders of the Afrikaner community. He famously had tea with the widow of one of the architects of apartheid, and in a moment of pure genius, at the 1995 Rugby World Cup, he walked onto the field wearing the jersey of the Springboks, the South African rugby team that had for so long been a symbol of white Afrikaner pride, a gesture of racial unity that brought the entire nation to tears. The ultimate message of Long Walk to Freedom is found in its final, profound pages. After becoming the first democratically elected president of a free South Africa, Mandela reflects on the meaning of his long journey. He realizes that true freedom is not just about casting off one's own chains. He writes, "I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." And then, he offers his final and most profound philosophical insight. He writes, "I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity." This is the incredible, world-changing wisdom of Nelson Mandela. It is a philosophy of radical empathy and universal humanity. It is a testament to the power of the human spirit to endure the unimaginable and to emerge from the darkest of nights, not with a desire for revenge, but with a heart big enough to forgive, to reconcile, and to build a new and better world for everyone. It is a deep inquiry into the very nature of what it means to be free. If you believe in the power of a single, courageous life to change the world, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to learn from the greatest leaders in human history.